My name is Iphigenia Monroe. I'm 62 years old and live in a small town near Madison, Wisconsin. After more than 30 years working as an accountant for a local construction company, I retired at the age of 59. I now live off my pension and the savings I built up during all those hardworking years. I'm not wealthy, but I have enough to live comfortably, spend without too much worry, and help my loved ones when needed. My family isn't large. I'm the eldest of 3 sisters, but now it's just me and my youngest sister, Alma, who are still alive. She's 8 years younger than me. She married late and has one daughter named Clarice, who's 26 this year. Alma's family lives in the suburbs of Chicago, about a 2.5-hour drive from me. Alma and I used to be very close. When we were young, we shared a small apartment in Milwaukee, back when she was studying psychology and I had just started working. Back then, our sisterhood felt more like a deep friendship. Later on, life took us down different paths, but we still kept in touch, regular calls, occasional weekend visits. Clarice grew up with my care, almost like a second mother to her, because Alma was often busy with work and her husband traveled frequently. I used to take care of Clarice for weeks during the summers. She used to call me Auntie Fee, a fun little nickname for Auntie Iphigenia. When Clarice got engaged to an Italian-American medical resident, I was one of the first people Alma called. She was thrilled, talking excitedly about the wedding, how it would be held at a luxury hall in downtown Chicago, with fresh flowers from Oregon, a French-style menu, and live music. About a week later, Alma called again, but this time, her voice was hesitant. She told me directly, her family was facing temporary financial difficulties. Her husband had just undergone heart surgery, insurance didn't cover all of it, and the wedding costs had doubled unexpectedly. Alma asked if I could help by fronting the payment for the venue, around $18,000, since the contract needed to be settled early to reserve the place. I didn't think too long. I knew Alma wasn't someone who took advantage, and I understood how much a mother wants a proper wedding for her only daughter. I agreed and wired the money directly to the event planning company under my name, for legal clarity. Alma said she would pay me back gradually once things settled. I didn't ask for a loan contract or any formal commitment. To me, it was simply helping my sister, just like many times before. I never imagined it would be the start of a series of events that would change our once solid sisterly bond forever. After transferring the money to Alma, I never brought up the subject again. I still trusted my sister, and more importantly, I saw it as my way of contributing to Clarice's special day. The same Clarice I once changed diapers for, took to piano lessons, and brought to children's plays every summer. In the first few weeks after that, Alma stayed in regular contact. She told me about the vendors, the dress fittings Clarice attended, and how they were choosing between 2 kinds of wine for the reception. I didn't interfere, just listened, smiled, and offered my congratulations. But gradually, the calls became fewer. My messages were answered more slowly, sometimes after a few days. I told myself, maybe Alma's just too busy with the wedding plans. I didn't want to bother her, so I just sent short, kind wishes, reminding her to take care of herself. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, or so I thought. About a month before the wedding, I happened to hear that Clarice had a wedding dress fitting with Alma and a few close friends at a high-end boutique. I wasn't invited. No one had told me about it either. Clarice had always been thoughtful, so this left me slightly hurt. But I told myself maybe it was meant to be a private moment, something for the younger generation. A week later, Alma called again. I thought she would update me about the wedding, but that call left me more confused than anything before. After a few pleasantries, Alma quickly shifted the conversation, her tone slightly hesitant. Hey, I just wanted to say this now, so there's no misunderstanding. Clarice really wants her wedding to feel modern and elegant. The style of the event is going to be a bit different from what our family usually does. I know you live simply, down to earth, and you might feel uncomfortable in something too formal. I gently interrupted and asked, "Are you saying I shouldn't come?" Alma paused for a few seconds. Then she spoke, carefully, but the message was unmistakable. "It's not that you shouldn't come, but Clarice feels you might not mesh well with guests from both families. She's worried you might feel out of place. So we think it's best to keep the event to those who fit the couple's vision. I was quiet for a few seconds. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't ask further. I didn't argue. I just said, I understand. Then I ended the call, calmly, as if nothing had happened. But inside, everything had changed. Not because I was excluded from a party, but because the people closest to me had chosen to treat me as a visual burden, an aesthetic risk that didn't belong. And that said more than any apology ever could. After that phone call, I sat back with a cup of tea, now cold, and stared out at the backyard. The tomato plants I had grown were beginning to ripen. It was early August, and the weather was just beginning to shift toward autumn. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone to complain. But I felt something clearly. The bond between Alma and me had changed. Not because of one big event, but because of small choices, repeated over time, slowly turning into distance. I walked into my home office, opened the drawer, and took out the venue rental contract. The original document had my name on it, as Alma had asked, since the paperwork needed a clear representative. I read through every clause carefully. The contract stated, if canceled at least 5 days in advance, 70% of the payment would be refunded, minus the non-refundable deposit. The wedding was scheduled for the following Saturday. I checked the time. There were still exactly 6 days left. The next morning, I called the venue manager, a woman named Marla, who spoke with a professional and courteous tone. I explained briefly that the event would no longer take place as planned, and that I wished to cancel according to the contract terms. Marla confirmed the refund policy and said the funds would be returned to my account within 3 business days. I agreed and didn't mention any personal reasons. Then I wrote a short message to Alma. Alma, I've contacted the venue and canceled the rental under my contractual rights. 70% of the cost will be refunded. If you need help finding another place, I can recommend a few options in the area. I hope everything goes smoothly moving forward. I didn't wait for a reply. Nor did I message her again. I knew Alma would see the message within minutes, and I knew she'd understand the consequences of my decision. But I didn't feel guilty. I hadn't ruined anything. I simply withdrew a help that, from the beginning, should have come with at least a basic level of respect. That same afternoon, my phone rang nonstop. Some calls were from Alma, others from Clarice. I left the phone in the house and went out to the garden to pull weeds. The sun was gentle that day. The air was cool enough that I could garden until near dusk without needing a hat. I didn't need any ringing to interrupt that peaceful afternoon. Sometimes it only takes being left off a guest list to realize your true worth. And sometimes it only takes one timely decision for others to learn that kindness should never be taken for granted. The next morning, while I was making coffee in the kitchen, the landline rang. I don't usually take calls early, but something told me to pick up. It was Alma on the other end, her voice urgent, no longer carrying the usual calm. You actually canceled the venue? You're joking, right? I answered gently. I'm not joking. I sent you a message about it yesterday. Alma went silent for a few seconds. I heard hurried footsteps, then someone, probably her husband, asked, What's going on? Alma brushed him off, then returned with a voice louder than usual. Clarice is panicking. Where are we supposed to find a venue in 3 days? Everything's already printed. The invitations, the hotel bookings, even the band schedule is set. Do you realize what you've done? I set my coffee mug down and spoke clearly. I did one simple thing. Canceled a payment that came from me. You said I didn't fit the style of your wedding, so it makes sense I shouldn't have my name on the contract either. You can now handle everything in the style that suits you. Alma didn't say anything more. There was only the sound of a quick hang-up. I wasn't angry. I just sat down, turned on the morning radio, and sipped my half-cold coffee. 2 days later, Clarice called me, for the first time in months. Her voice no longer carried its usual cheer. It was a mix of stress and pleading. I heard about what happened. Mom is freaking out. I don't know what went wrong between you two, but the venue being canceled, could you maybe talk to them? I replied gently. There was no disagreement. I'm just no longer on the guest list. That's all. Clarice hesitated. It seemed like she wanted to deny it, but stopped herself. Finally, she said quietly, I'm sorry. I think things went too far. If I come visit you after the honeymoon, would you accept me? I paused for a moment, and then said, My door is still open, I said. Just no longer with a sign that reads, Guests by condition only. In the following 3 days, I heard that the wedding took place in Alma's backyard. They rented a large tent, strung up temporary lights, and rushed to book a new catering service. The wedding still happened, but not with the glamour Clarice had dreamed of. And the photos never made it to the local bridal magazine, as originally planned. I didn't go. I was never reinvited, and I didn't expect to be. But the next morning, I found a small envelope in my mailbox. No invitation, no bouquet, just a single sheet of paper, handwritten in Clarice's slanted script. I'm sorry. I hope there's still a chance to begin again. I folded the note and placed it in the drawer. I didn't reply, but something inside me had softened. And I knew. Every lesson comes with a cost. 3 days after the wedding, Alma showed up at my house unannounced. I heard her car stop outside, followed by a soft knock at the gate. She was wearing a beige coat, her hair tied neatly, and her face looked tired. No longer the polished makeup she usually wore. I opened the door. We looked at each other for a moment. Then I quietly stepped aside. Alma followed me inside without saying a word. I brewed 2 cups of tea and placed them on the wooden table in the living room. No accusations were spoken. No anger filled the air. Just a silence, like a fine layer of dust over a bond that had weathered many years. Alma was the first to speak. I went too far, Alma said. I shouldn't have said those things over the phone. I shouldn't have let Clarice misunderstand you like that. You were there for Clarice more than I ever was during the first decade of her life. I remember that. But somehow, over time, I started to see you as always strong, always independent. I thought you wouldn't care about things like a wedding, seating charts, or who got invited. I was wrong. I set my teacup down and looked at Alma. It wasn't about being left off the guest list. It was about being seen as not suitable, as if I were a discordant note in the picture you and Clarice were trying to paint. That's not a small thing. Alma nodded, her eyes slightly red. Clarice cried after the wedding. I stayed quiet. Inside me, there was a small warmth, not because someone had tried to make amends, but because I knew that what I had done, what I had given, hadn't been completely forgotten. I'll transfer the refund to you, Alma said. And I know we can't pretend like nothing happened, but if someday you'd like to have dinner with us, or just sit down for tea like we used to, I hope that door is still open. I looked out at the yard. A light breeze swayed the curtains. I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. These things aren't resolved with a simple yes or no. They take time and consistency in the actions that follow. At the end of her visit, I walked Alma to the gate. No hugs, no handshakes. Just a farewell between 2 people trying to rebuild something that was once very close, now needing to be reconstructed from the ground up, slowly, more carefully.